How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Conversationalists across the fruited plain, I welcome you to this Open Line Friday. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, listen, I want to guide you if you want to make it to the program today. And I haven't actually, Charlie, my apologies, I haven't said this to you ahead of time. I'm happy to take your questions today. If you've got non-crazy questions about the election and the state of play in the race and how campaigns work and what they're looking for and stuff, and I want to walk you through some of that today. I realized the last 2 days I've started this program with tirades, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of people that, that was so good, and I always feel bad starting by yelling at everybody. Nonetheless, I don't want to do that today. I didn't send out a morning email because I've been on the phones the entire morning, just trying to get a sense of what's happening out there. And if you'll allow me at the beginning of the show today to just bring you up to speed and educate you on the state of play of the race, because there are some signs. Let's talk about the trends in early voting that are out there. And I begin with this caution. You can't actually take a lot from them, even though they're important to consider. Scientifically, so to speak, a vote today is the same as a vote on Election Day. They're weighed the same. They go into a common vote pool. And you may have a situation because of one's life and circumstance that they needed to vote early this time. They normally vote on Election Day, or someone normally votes early and they're going to vote on Election Day. So you have to be very careful with the early voting trends. But there actually are some trends, and those trends are actually causing the Democrats some heartburn. If you text data to 33777 and subscribe to the show notes, I just emailed out, should be arriving in your inbox any second now, what these trends are. Let's review them. In Georgia, out of 2.1 million votes cast, over 300,000 are from low propensity voters, specifically from people who did not vote in 2020. We don't know how those people are voting, but what's notable is that they are voting this time. In 2020 and 2022, the black vote at this point in Georgia, as of today, 11 days before the election, was roughly 31%. In fact, in 2022, Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp, the black vote was about 34% of the vote. Right now, the black vote in Georgia is 26% of the early vote, and among black men, they're virtually not showing up. In fact, this is one of the things giving Democrats some concern in congressional districts in Virginia, in Georgia, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, though the black vote there is disproportionately small. But in Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia, in areas where you would expect to see a large black vote in early voting, given the historic nature of it, they haven't shown up, particularly black men. Now, there's a phenomenon that happens this weekend called Souls to the Polls, where black voters and the black churches all get together on buses and they show up at the polls as a show of the strength of the black vote. And so they could show up this Saturday. We'll find out more on Monday, Tuesday as the voting totals are processed. But it's not happening right now, and it's actually lower than it should be. In Nevada, for the first time in history, Republicans are outpacing Democrats in the early vote, so much so that Steve Daines, the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, has canceled his trips today to fly to Nevada to campaign with Sam Brown. If the momentum is headed towards the GOP, that's going to help Sam Brown. He may not be able to pull it off. Republicans had counted him out. Democrats had counted him out. The fact that Steve Daines, the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, is suddenly canceling trips to campaign with other candidates to go campaign with Sam Brown and give him money suggests the Republican internal polling is showing them something encouraging. In North Carolina, remarkably, and despite the hurricane, Republican early voting is matching the Democratic early voting, and that's unheard of. This hasn't happened. For perspective, Republicans in North Carolina have not matched the Democratic turnout in North Carolina since George W. Bush's reelection in 2004. In Pennsylvania, Democrats are outpacing Republicans in the early voting, and that's actually normal. Disproportionately, the Democrats vote early in Pennsylvania. What is not normal is that the Republicans are over 30% of the early vote. In 2016 and 2020, for perspective, the Republicans were under 30%. They're over 30% now. In 2020, Republican turnout at this point in Pennsylvania was about 25%. It's at 31% today. In 2016, when Donald Trump won at this point, it was at 28%. And it's over 30% right now. That, my friends, is giving Democrats heartburn. Again, just to restate this for you, in Georgia, the black vote is not turning out at the rate it has turned out in the last two elections. It's under 30%. It should be over 30% at this time. And 300,000 people who did not vote in 2020 have come in to vote. They're white people from North Georgia. In Nevada, for the first time in history, Republicans are beating Democrats in the early vote. In North Carolina, for the first time since 2004, when George Bush won re-election, the Republicans and Democrats are tied in the early vote. And in Pennsylvania, Democrats are outpacing the Republicans, but normally Republicans are under 30%, and this time they're over 30% of the early vote. There's only so much you can take from early voting. From the trends, however, the Democrats have gotten nervous. Here's what the Democrats are telling themselves right now. What they're telling themselves is that the pollsters have overcorrected. In 2016 and in 2020, pollsters undercounted Trump's support. So what Democrats are telling themselves right now is that the pollsters have overcorrected and are now overstating Donald Trump's support. Therefore, Kamala Harris is actually ahead. The polls have overinflated Trump's support, a bias towards Donald Trump. That's what they're saying, and that has Republicans concerned. However, the New York Times Siena College poll is probably the best pollster. The reason they're the best pollster is not because the New York Times Siena poll is the most accurate, although it was in 2022. The reason the New York Times Siena College poll is the best poll is because they release every bit of their data. They don't keep anything back. They're even willing to produce bad polls. A lot of pollsters, when they produce an anomalous poll that deviates from everyone else, they correct it. They make adjustments to it to make it conform to what everyone else does. The New York Times Siena College poll does not do that, which makes them a very credible pollster. They're willing to throw out their poll and say, hey, we may get this wrong, but here's our data. The New York Times Siena College poll is also not out readjusting its model to try to make things look a particular way. Other polls are doing that. And the New York Times Siena College poll had Kamala Harris up 3 2 weeks ago. They now have the race tied. Not only that, like the Wall Street Journal polling and the Fox News polling, they're showing a collapse in Kamala Harris's favorables and an increase in Donald Trump's favorables. So here's the thing. Let's go back to what the Democrats are telling themselves. The Democrats are telling themselves that there is an overwhelming bias now for Donald Trump and that the pollsters have compensated from understating his support in 2016 and 2020 to now overstating it. So in this election, they say Donald Trump is actually going to underperform his polling. That may be true, but the numbers are never right. What do I tell you guys about studying polls? Don't believe the numbers, but believe the trends. So a poll that is oversampling Donald Trump support by 10%, say it's 10% more people likely to vote Trump than actually are in public, they're oversampling by 10%. If that poll shows movement towards Donald Trump or away from Kamala Harris, we know that that number is overstated because they've oversampled Trump supporters. But the movement, if it's consistent with other polling, we know the movement then is detecting what other polls are detecting. And so the movement is being picked up in the poll, even as the numbers for one candidate or another are overstated. All of the major polling right now, the New York Times poll, the Wall Street Journal poll, the CNBC poll, the NBC poll, the Fox News poll, the Quinnipiac poll, they're all showing, even by the way, the tip poll that shows Kamala Harris winning, what all of them are showing, the poll showing Trump in the lead, the poll showing the race tied, and the poll showing Kamala Harris in the lead, all of the polls are showing momentum headed in the direction of Donald Trump. So in a poll that has Kamala Harris up 2 right now, 3 weeks ago she was up 5. It's showing a shift to Donald Trump. In the New York Times poll that had Kamala Harris up 3, they're now tied. In the Fox News poll that had Kamala Harris up 1, Donald Trump is now up 2. So it doesn't, forget the bottom line number. That's where the polling average comes in handy. It weeds that out. It's the momentum that actually shows you the direction of the race. Also, believe your eyes. Who's having fun out there? The Democrats are running around saying, if Donald Trump wins, it's the end of America. We will speak German goose step and the Nazis will be on the rise. Donald Trump was literally on stage last night with a toddler dressed up as Donald Trump, holding him up for the crowd, laughing. The Trump rallies are not angry. They're funny. The Harris rallies are angry. The Democrats' closing argument, which we'll get to in a minute, is that if you vote for Donald Trump, America is over. That's not a reassuring, winning, closing, optimistic, happy, let's do this for America, rah-rah message. That is a doom and gloom message, and winning campaigns do not close on doom and gloom. Now, caveat. The bottom line here is this is a very tight race. The momentum does appear to be headed to Donald Trump, but there are 11 days to go, and Donald Trump is known for saying really stupid, offensive stuff on stage that kills his momentum. Never underestimate Donald Trump and the Republican Party's ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. In contrast, Kamala Harris might get on stage and say something smart for once. Instead of having a word salad, she may have a comprehensible phrase, and that could dazzle and delight people. Say, oh, she's not the dimwit we thought she was. Or Kamala Harris could do something else stupid and shift the race further to Donald Trump. It is a tied race. Little things like this matter in the next 11 days. I'll give Harry Hinton here the last word.
Trump may finally get his great white whale. Harris versus Trump national margin. You mentioned that New York Times poll, a tie. That's actually right in the middle of the spectrum when we're talking about recent polling data. You don't have to look very far to find Donald Trump ahead nationally. He was up by 2 points in the CNBC poll, up by 3 in the Wall Street Journal poll. Very close races within the margin of error. But then the same thing on the other side, right? You have Harris up by 3 points according to Ipsos. The Say 24 YouGov poll, it's a bunch of academics, also has Harris up by 3. But the bottom line is, with the popular vote, which we really haven't focused upon, a very, very tight race, John. Fact is, Donald Trump is very much in a position he could win the popular vote, which, of course, is something he would absolutely love to do.
And would be something very different than we have seen compared to last time and the polling compared to last time.
Exactly right. So I went back through the time machine, all right? I went back through the time machine to see where were the past 2 races at this point in the campaign. Look, Harris in the average poll right now is up by 1. Well within the margin of error. You go back 4 years ago, Joe Biden was well ahead of Donald Trump in the national popular vote polls. He was up by 9. Even Hillary Clinton was up by 6 points. So now Donald Trump's in a position he really hasn't been before at this point in the campaign, where he could truly compete, and we can truly say that the popular vote at this point is way too close to call. Of course, this is only going back 8 years. I wanted to jump even further back in my time machine to get an understanding. Hey, I haven't heard about a Republican potentially winning the popular vote in a while. And it turns out a Republican winning the popular vote, it hasn't happened since 2004 and George W. Bush defeating John Kerry. And that's only the one time that it has happened. In fact, you have to go all the way back to 1988 to find another one, when it was George W. Bush's father, George H.W. Bush, winning the popular vote over Michael Dukakis.
I would submit to you that when CNN is talking 11 days before the election that Donald Trump could win the popular vote, the news media knows where the momentum is, even if we don't know who the winner is going to be. Welcome back. The phone number is 877-973-7425. It's an open line Friday, but really, I want to entertain your calls if you got questions about campaigns and elections and the state of play in this particular race, more than other topics. And we are going to get into some other stuff today. We got a North Korea news story. We got some Iranian news stories to get to, but this is the last Friday in some places before early voting winds down. We're starting to get the data, and we are at the last moment. Campaigns can make adjustments. So what do the campaigns do after today? Because after today, you're done. You're done trying to get new voters to vote, barring unforeseen news items. What you do from tomorrow on is you try to maximize your voter turnout. In fact, I'm participating in a Get Out the Vote event with Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia tomorrow, as he tries to get his voters in North Georgia to turn out. And it looks like, by the way, Kemp is pulling a lot of people to the polls with his efforts. I was talking to a member of the Georgia legislature last night saying that if anyone deserves credit for a Trump win in Georgia, they may not want to give it to him, but Kemp has mobilized his entire ground game operation in Georgia, and it's working. He's doing a rally tomorrow and then others next week. So today's kind of it. You got to start putting your last ads in. Your last pieces of mail have to go into the mailbox to be mailed out. And from here on out, it's voter mobilization. You're trying to find your voters who haven't voted early to get them to the polls on Election Day. That's it. That is your entire last week of a campaign, is voter mobilization, not to find new voters, but to get your existing voters out to vote. And the closing argument for the Democrats, wow, we'll get to it when we come back. First, I got to tell you about Old Glory Bank. Old Glory Bank is a bank that was chartered in Oklahoma, and they've expanded to be nationwide. They're an online bank. They don't have a physical retail location in your area, but it doesn't matter. I was talking to a business the other day who wanted to get a loan from Old Glory Bank. They flew someone to his business and worked with him. I have talked to individuals now who are getting their mortgage through Old Glory Bank, and they have a hands-on person at Old Glory Bank they talk to. It's the same person every time, familiar with their filings. Everyone I have sent to Old Glory Bank has been happy, and I will tell you, I've been a customer of theirs for over a year. I'm very happy with Old Glory Bank. I have a no-fee checking account. I have a no-fee savings account. You can do CDs. You can do loans for cars. You can do mortgages. You name it. They're good people. They are conservatives. They were started by conservatives for conservatives. They would love to be your bank or your kid's bank as well. You can even deposit cash through their great app with 88,000 retail locations. OldGloryBank.com. Fill out the form online to get an account. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. My fellow Americans, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, it is an open line Friday. All I ask, however, today is that if you call in, please be calling in about relevant questions to campaigns and elections, as we are 11 days away. Early voting begins to wind down this weekend around the country. We've got over 30 million people have registered, have voted early. More than a third, closer to half now in my state, in Georgia, have already voted early. I want to begin in St. Augustine, Florida. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hi, Eric. Great show.
Thank you.
On your comments there about the closing arguments that Harris has, doom and gloom and Hitler, 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 I'm surprised that the fact that she grew up in a Marxist home, I believe her father was a professor of Marxism, why that hasn't come out stronger and probably shows a greater light on the policies she's supporting.
Okay. So, folks, I'm going to use Dave as an example here. Dave is the sort of question that's going to make me look good because I actually know the answer to this question because I talked to the Trump campaign about this question. So, Dave, I will tell you what the Trump campaign tells me. They believe that calling her a Marxist is no more effective with the undecided voters than calling him a fascist is. What the voters care about is a secure border and a better economy. Everyone on the right calls Democrats a communist and a Marxist. And so with undecided voters, they tune it out. You already know the background, and you think she probably is a Marxist, and you're not going to vote for her. A person who's undecided between the two of them thinks that every Republican calls every Democrat a Marxist or a communist. They want to know what Donald Trump's going to do on the border. So he's spending his last 2 weeks on the campaign trail talking about the border and the economy. And they actually think that works to their advantage as opposed to the Harris campaign's closing argument being that he's a fascist. They don't think in their own data that argument is persuasive to undecided voters. They think the reason Harris is doing it is because she's given up on undecided voters and is trying to mobilize her base to turn out. That makes sense?
Right. It does. It just seems like, her Hitler is just, blowing steam. But the fact that, her parents, in particular her father, was actually involved in teaching Marxism seems to be a fact that would be valuable to voters. But
yes, except so Harris has conscientiously avoided putting her parents out on the campaign trail. Wow, y'all should see my screen. Apparently, I have some gesture on where if I do thumbs up at the camera, it's wow. I got to turn that off. Sorry, I'm just realizing, Dave, I've got a camera live stream, and I am apparently my hands are causing the camera to do emoji gestures on camera while I'm talking. Okay, turn that option off. Okay, so Dave, to that, so she hasn't put him out there, and this is me as someone who knows campaigns saying because this part I haven't talked to the campaign about. If Donald Trump were to do that, that would probably hurt him with undecided voters attacking her through her father. Historically, there are copious examples of this, going back to Michael Dukakis attacking George H.W. Bush because of George H.W. Bush's father, that voters really despise it when a candidate attacks another candidate through their family.
Mm-hmm.
So it may work for you and me, but for Donald Trump, it potentially could blow up in his face. So I would tell him, don't bring up her father at all. Do not do it. Undecided voters, there could be a backlash. Now, to this point, those of you on the phones, stand by. I gotta go to this other point Dave and I were talking about. Nasty closing campaigns, I don't think actually work. I want to show you, I want to tell you about a picture. And those of you who are watching me on a camera somewhere, you'll be able to see this picture. In 2004, towards the end of the campaign, now this picture was taken from Spain, but it was a picture that was also used by Democrats in the United States. It is a picture of George W. Bush. They have photoshopped George Bush's head onto Adolf Hitler's head, wearing his Nazi uniform with his arm outstretched, with a little mustache painted on George W. Bush. And at the top in Gothic letters, it says Bush, and the S is a swastika. The Democrats used that picture on the campaign trail at the end of the election. Democrats ended their election in 2004 arguing that George W. Bush was Hitler. I began to, and still to this day, refer to George Bush on radio as George Chimney McBush Hitler Halliburton. George Bush was like a chimp. He was like Hitler. He was in the pocket of Halliburton. George Chimney McBush Hitler Halliburton. He was in the pockets of big corporations. Those were their attacks on George Bush in 2004, to no avail. Here's where we are in the election right now. This is the conversation on CNN with little Eric Swalwell.
And those folks want to move on with their lives. I meet independents and Republicans, many of them are my family members, who tell me they just want to get back to their lives. They don't want to wake up every morning and check Twitter and see what he's tweeting from the toilet. They want to get back to their own lives, and that's part of the case that Kamala Harris is making. She's going to focus on what you need in your life, and this is not going to be another me presidency.
Right. No conversation about issues there. All about Donald Trump. Here's Hillary Clinton on CNN.
And, you know, one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany. So I don't think we can ignore it. Now,
going straight after Donald Trump as a neo-Nazi, Hitler doing a Madison Square Garden event to rally Long Island Republicans for Congress. Here's Barack Obama on the campaign stage.
Said the other day, January 6th was a day of love, he said that. Like it was Woodstock or Coachella. If your grandpa was acting like this, you'd call up your brother, call up your cousin, and you say, hey, have you noticed Grandpa? He acting kind of funny right now. But here's the interesting thing, is he acts so crazy, and it's become so common that people no longer take it seriously. I'm here to explain to you, just because he acts goofy does not mean his presidency wouldn't be dangerous. And you do not have to take my word for it. Lately, some of the people who know Donald Trump best.
That is a minute and 30-second diatribe from Barack Obama in Clarkston, Georgia yesterday, the most diverse square mile in America. Not talking up Kamala Harris, but scaring people about Donald Trump. Here's John Meacham on MSNBC with Willie Geist.
That's exactly it. You know, Vice President Harris isn't on trial here in the same way President Biden wasn't on trial when he was running. We are. The American people are on trial. And if we choose, if a sufficient number of us in a sufficient number of states choose to ignore the evidence that, as the Bible says, those with eyes to see and ears to hear can detect, then there's no, we have no excuse. We might have an explanation, which is that for a series of reasons, people are not holding the Republican Party and the nominee of that party to rational account. And I think that this is a test of citizenship in a way that certainly you'd have to go back, I think, to both the 19th century and the civil rights era to find anything equivalent.
You get this, if he's elected, it's your fault and you're awful and the American people have failed history. That's John Meacham's argument here. Here's Bruce Springsteen.
She's running to be the 47th president of the United States. Donald Trump is running to be an American tyrant.
That's Bruce Springsteen. By the way, is it not weird that they sent Beyonce to Texas and Bruce Springsteen to Georgia instead of the other way around? That right there seems to be a programming tone deafness. Beyonce would work better with this crowd in Clarkston than she would in Texas. Bruce Springsteen would work better in Texas, and yet they're not there. That's a weird setup. And then there's Mitch Landrieu, the chairman of the Harris-Walz campaign.
You've never had in the history of the country a president want to be like Adolf Hitler. I mean, that's just such an extraordinary statement that have come from now a number of people that it should cause everybody in America to stop and think about how devastatingly impossible that is to contemplate have somebody like that sitting behind the Oval Office.
And lastly, Charlemagne the God on CNN with Anderson Cooper.
I think that her saying that she thinks that she believes Donald Trump is a fascist got a lot of headlines because it was the first time she said it. She's been going along for days saying Mark Milley said he's a fascist. This person said this. You raised the question of authenticity in your interview with her, and that was an authentic moment where she says, "Yeah, I do think he's a fascist," and I think that's why it had a reaction. Donald Trump, he for whatever you think about him, if you like him, if you hate him, he is certainly who he is. He's shown us who he is every single day.
Yeah, which is a fascist. And it's crazy because you still don't have news networks having that conversation. Yeah. Like when somebody says, when somebody questions Kamala Harris's blackness or is he a DEI hire, y'all will have roundtable discussions about that, asking that question. How come you're not having roundtable discussions asking, is Donald Trump a fascist? Actually, not even asking it, stating it. I mean, when you look at the things that he's talking about doing, jailing journalists, jailing his political opponents, turning the military on American citizens. The guy said he wanted to terminate the Constitution to overthrow the results of an election. How come that is not the topic of discussion on networks like CNN every day?
And by the way, it is. It is. Y'all, this is not a winning closing argument from the Democrats. I'm sorry, it's not. I know, and this is the point. Those of you who are Democrats listening right now are yelling at me. It is. It is. He's a fascist. It is. It's a winning closing argument for you, but you were already going to vote for Kamala Harris. It's not a winning closing argument for undecided voters. It's not a winning closing argument for people who care about the economy or immigration. It's not a winning closing argument to persuade anyone outside the base. And that kind of hints at the issue here that the Democrats are no longer trying to persuade anyone to vote for Kamala Harris. They're trying to get the base out to vote. This goes full circle to the opening monologue of the show today. In Georgia, over 300,000 people who did not vote in 2020 have voted. We don't know how they voted, but they're white people from North Georgia. Black men are not voting. Black voting overall in Georgia is 26%. It should be over 32% in early voting for Kamala Harris to have a chance in Georgia. In North Carolina, Republican voters are tied with Democrats for the first time since 2004. In Nevada, Republicans are outpacing Democrats in the early vote for the first time in American history. In Miami-Dade County, Florida, Republicans are outpacing Democrats for only the second time, the first time being Ron DeSantis' reelection in 2022. In Hillsborough County, Florida, Republicans are outpacing Democrats for the first time. The Democrats are scaring people with the Hitler talk, not because they're trying to persuade, but they're trying to get their voters to turn out. And they would not be so hysterical about it if their voters were turning out. All of this tells me the Democrats right now are looking at the early vote and they're panicked that it's their own voters, not the undecided voters. It's their own voters who are not showing up at the polls, and they've given up trying to make a positive case for Kamala Harris and instead are trying to motivate their base with fear. Let me tell you about Hillsdale College. You don't need to be motivated with fear to go there, just love for this country. Hillsdale College, since the 1800s, has been giving away free educational resources as their mission is to educate Americans wherever they are through any means possible. They have their podcast network. They have online lectures. They have, for example, if you go to ericforhillsdale.com today, get a free Constitution and Declaration of Independence that fits in your pocket. I've got mine around here somewhere. Hillsdale College wants to educate you. They don't want to indoctrinate you. They want you to love your country, and they want to explain why America is unique. The Hillsdale College Podcast Network, available in your favorite podcast app, gives you lots of great conversations with Larry Arnn and others from Hillsdale College. You can get Imprimis absolutely for free All you have to do is go to ericforhillsdale.com, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up with Hillsdale College today. Get their free pocket constitutional Declaration of Independence. Get Imprimus. Get their lectures for free from Larry Arnn, from Victor Davis Hanson, from so many others. It's part of their mission. They've been doing it since the 1800s. Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. Hello and welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you are in the business of business and need access to capital, reach out to them. They might be able to help you. FirstLibertyGA.com. All their contact info is there. FirstLibertyGA.com. All right, back to the folds. Mark, I'm glad you called. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Love your show. And we really appreciate your political acumen. I trust it. But let's rewind to the 2022 midterms. I'm having a deja vu moment, man. In the couple of weeks before the election, I'm hearing the same things that I'm hearing now. And we got drugged. I mean, it wasn't even close. I can see if it was a tight election and we just got a few things wrong, but how could we be so wrong? And help me out.
Okay, I'm glad you, Mark. I'm glad you called, and for those who listen regularly, this may be a little broken record for you, but this is a point I keep getting from people, Mark. So let me explain this with you. So first of all, this is a tied election, and my point is that the momentum is clearly with Donald Trump from the trend lines we're seeing and the polling we're seeing, but it is a tied election, and he could say something stupid tomorrow and kill his momentum. The difference between now and 2022, however, is this: in 2022. By the end of August, every major media poll in the United States of America had the red wave gone, wiped out. The only polls that had the red wave were the Republican polls from Trafalgar and from McLaughlin and from Rasmussen. And myself included, all the Republicans looked and said, oh, look, the American media is trying to kill our momentum. The Republican pollsters are accurate. The Republican pollsters are showing the red wave now. New York Times Siena had it completely wiped out it went from an R+5 race to a D+1 race by the end of the New York Times Siena College poll. But Trafalgar and Rasmussen, all of them had massive waves for Republicans, and myself included thought, oh, look at that. It's the New York Times, it's USA Today, it's ABC, NBC, the Wall Street Journal. They're trying to screw us in momentum. Their polls are lying. The Republicans are telling the truth. And it turns out the Republican pollsters were skewing the polling and skewing the polling average to make it look like the red wave was still there. But ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, CNN, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, USA Today, every media poll had no red wave at the end. And we all were believing the Republican pollsters, not the media polls. And it turns out the media wasn't lying to us. There was no red wave except in New York and California. And the New York Times Siena College poll dialed it in almost to the exact percent that Republicans would get in the popular vote. It wound up being like R plus 0.5, which was their final poll. So that's the big difference between now and then. I am ignoring all the Republican pollsters right now and just looking at the media polls.